Hello and welcome to She Rocks, a CNN-IBN special broadcast on International Women's Day where we celebrate womanhood. We also take stock of where we stand as a country when it comes to women's issues, and we're looking at the road ahead. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and with me is a very special panel of guests. We have Sania Mirza, tennis ace and one of the biggest names in Indian and indeed international sport. She's also the UN Goodwill Ambassador for South Asia to fight violence against women. Dr. Rebecca Tavares, the UN Women's Representative for India, Bhutan, Maldives and Sri Lanka, who also works towards promoting gender equality and partnership for women. We have Anthony J. Alex, he's the CEO of Rainmaker. He's working with big corporates to try and implement best practices. You've also started WorkSafe. It's India's first online training solution for corporates on the new anti-sexual harassment law. And of course, we have Sanjoy K. Roy, MD, Teamworks Productions with interest in visual and performing arts, social sector, films, television. He's also the man behind The Sounds of Freedom. It's a concert that fosters the idea of equality and freedom through music. Thank you all for being with us on this panel. Let me start with you. When you were first told that you're going to join a discussion on Women's Day, what was the first thought in your head? Did you think, oh my God, not another talkathon where we have the same jargon and the same catchphrases? Or did you think that this is...
Well, considering that I'm the UN Goodwill Ambassador, I can't think like that, and I shouldn't be thinking like that to start with. But whenever I'm called upon for discussions about women's issues or women's rights or equality, which is usually what we talk about when it comes to a Women's Day and how tough it's been for us as women to make it or not make it to where we are. I always enjoy it because I love to understand what people think of these views and what other people think, especially men, more than women. And so no, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
What do you think when you think of International Women's Day?
When I think of women, for me, it's about equality. It is about gender equality, and it should be for everyone. I don't know why it's such a big issue and why it's so hard for people to understand, to be very honest. But when I think about International Women's Day, I just feel that it's a way to celebrate women on an international platform. And I think that women work very, very hard in the house and outside the house. And I think sometimes they deserve one day where everything's dedicated to them. So that's what I feel about International Women's Day.
Right. Dr. Tavares, the theme this year is empower women, empower humanity, picture it. How do you picture it in a country like ours?
Women and children and girls, men and women standing together for women's rights. We are here tonight because of the concert that we're putting on, the Sounds of Freedom concert, which will feature empowered women singing. We're so fortunate to have Sania with us today. Picturing it is about reaching out into people's minds and their hearts, reaching far beyond the rhetoric of UN language or laws and policies, so that people can see what it's like to be empowered. They can participate in social media, films, culture, music. We want to reach well beyond the usual suspects and reach out into the cultural communities so that we can all picture what it looks like for women to be equal to men.
Right. Sanjoy, I want to come to you now. Hashtags like She Rocks or Make It Happen are trending on Twitter when it comes to Women's Day and women's issues. But how do you make it happen? What is the biggest impediment that we face as a country?
I think in our world today, because it's so unequal, of course, one day for women is that, sufficient to create equality. I think what we have to do is we have to create a sense that each person realizes that equality is something you have to fight for, both women and men, to be able to create a platform which both sides come together and celebrate what is humanity. And we have to do that in a way which is not, as you said, a talkathon necessarily, not just a day which is instituted by a organization, but it has to be done in a way that reaches out to young people, and they have to be the instruments of change today. Because without young people, not just this country, most of the world is not going anywhere. So do it in a way that infuses their spirit, captures that sense of enthusiasm, and makes them believe that yes, they have to do this, they have to fight, not just for themselves, but for each other on a platform that is equal.
Anthony, Alex, because of the public outrage and the media pressure, laws in India vis-a-vis women have become stronger now, but has it made any tangible difference on the ground?
Long overdue, if you ask me. It should have happened maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago. It's a step in the right direction. But the law also requires, the law by itself is not enough. There's got to be a change in mindset, in the way people think. To take a very recent and unfortunate example, Mukesh the rapist, the Nirbhaya rapist. His comments are symptomatic of the way our society thinks, whether it's men or even women at some level. That's the way a lot of people think, and unless you change that mindset, you're not going to find a tangible change on the ground. I'll give you some stats. We have, out of a workforce of maybe 10 crore people, at least 2.5 crores are women, right? They form a significant chunk of India's working population. About 17 to 18% of them have reported being sexually harassed at the workplace, not once, not twice, 3 or 4 times during the course of their careers, right? And most tragically, I think about 90% of the cases of sexual harassment at the workplace go unreported. Women don't even bother escalating it because, you'll be branded as a feminist or somebody who's complaining. The men gang up, they make it hard for you to work. You'll probably be hounded out of that company,
right,
and so on and so forth. So there are a number of reasons why women are scared to complain. So I think the mindset change is important. Stop blaming chow mein, mobile phones, jeans, education. There are 100 things that people come up with. We've got to stop blaming all that and create the right mentality.
Sania, every time there's a discussion on women's right and safety, it's the mindset that emerges as the biggest culprit. And you have been at the receiving end of this kind of prejudice and parochialism in full public glare. How did you deal with it initially, and have you come to terms with it now?
I think that it's never easy to come to terms with the fact that you're not equal, whether it's at a public platform or if it's at a personal level. I completely agree that I think that it's a mindset that we are fighting with. We're not fighting against a person or what a rapist is saying or what a molester is saying. We are fighting against a mindset where not just men but also women believe that they're inferior, and I think that's where the problem lies. I think as women, if we feel that we can do anything that a man can, and if we can achieve anything that a man can, and we should be able to, I think that will actually kill half of the problem. Of course, I think more than, I come from a family of 2 girls, and we've never felt that, because we were a girl, I had to come back at a certain time, and, and if we had a boy in a family, something else would have happened, and I could come back at whatever time I wanted, as long as I was safe. As far as being questioned on a public platform, which I was many times, yes, I do believe, and I have gotten enough criticism because I say this also, but the fact is there are a lot of problems I wouldn't have faced if I was not a woman. If I was a man, I think I would have gotten away with a lot more. I think that we live in a society, unfortunately, which is tough for not just men but even women to handle when another woman has is very opinionated, who speaks good English, who is very strong. I think that men feel threatened a little bit, and I faced a lot of problems, of course, whether it was because of that, whether it was because of another reason, but I'm pretty sure if I was a man, I would have gotten away with a lot more. Having said that though, the odds were always against me and a lot of other women who have achieved, and it's doable, and that's what I try to go on these public platforms and say, that it's always doable, it's not impossible.
A woman on her own would like to achieve certain things, but as Sania also said, we all know that family support is very important, because if you go against what your family is saying, after a point of time you'll think, is this worth it? Should I upset everyone who's so important in my life? Do you believe that that level of sensitization then is going up, at least with this discourse, public discourse, or do you think that we still have a long way to go?
I always say, when I'm in India, on the media, that the problems that we see with women's equality here are exactly the same as they are all over the world, north, south, east, and west. We live in a patriarchal world, and women face the same barriers everywhere. And yes, the family is the place where girls learn what their role should be, and boys also learn how they think women should behave. And so we do need to change attitudes and behaviors in the families, with children, also in the schools, but I think it's a huge challenge. I think it has to be a culture change that reaches well beyond the laws and the policies, and it's something that we can, starting with the young people, and especially with boys and men, who now understand what they need to do to stand up, to stand on this side by side with women, stand up when they see women being either abused or discriminated against, speak out, and it has to become a worldwide phenomenon. So that's what UN Women is trying to do now with the He for She campaign, is to reach out through culture, through media, through films, working with people in all walks of life, and also supporting the ordinary men, like the policeman who stands up for the woman's right and actually registers the case of abuse against women, or the police chief that puts the trafficker behind bars. We have to go with, everyday ordinary acts of solidarity with women and recognize those men, commend those men, and encourage all men to stand up for women.
Anthony mentioned Mukesh Singh just now, and it's shocking the kind of words he said. This is a convict, he's a rape convict, and he's saying, and I'm quoting here, you're talking about man and woman as friends. Sorry, that doesn't have any place in our society. We have the best culture. In our culture, there is no place for a woman. And as we discussed earlier, your first reaction is, but then that's how most of them think. He's saying it, others aren't. Do you feel that despite all the efforts that you're making as a Goodwill Ambassador of the UN, as emerging as a role model, still is it disheartening sometimes when you listen to something like this?
Last night when I read that article, I mean it actually angered me, because when we come out as women and we say, there is this kind of, we live in this society where men feel that women are a step below or a few steps below in some cases, and the men laugh it off and they say, oh, that used to happen, that happens in only in the villages, or that used to happen in, I used to living in the 18th century, 19th century. No, it happens, and this is a living example. The guy feels no guilt. I mean, to me it's amazing, and I mean, it actually angers me that how this man is still alive, to be very honest with you, because I mean, he's still out there, he's giving interviews and he's saying things like this. I mean, yes, it's extremely sad.
And what he's saying is that if a woman is raped in the future, she'll not come out alive, because then the rapist will think, oh, if this is what happens, let's just kill her and let's... I mean, he's threatening... Yeah, you could say that a man like you shouldn't take what he's saying too seriously. But
no, but what I'm also saying is that it takes all kind of sick people to make this world, and clearly he's not mentally normal. I mean, there must be some kind of imbalance somewhere, because normal people don't speak this way. And if they do, then there's a problem with our society, that the whole society has a chemical imbalance going on in their minds, because if a lot of men think this way, then obviously there's a problem somewhere. Either we are failing, or the men are failing, or the parents are failing, or the society is failing. Something's failing, and we have to try and make it better however we can, but it needs to be done soon, because there's going to be a lot more Mukeshes then, and he's sitting in jail and he is not scared to say that, oh well, too bad, she was out at 9 o'clock at night. So I mean, to me it's extremely disturbing, to be very honest, because not just as a woman, but I think as men, I don't think as human beings, if someone is not disturbed by hearing this, I find it very odd, and that needs to change.
So despite everything, is there more reason to be cheerful or cynical?
I think that I feel that there's always room for improvement, but I am an optimist, so I'm going to say I'm going to be cheerful about the present, but I hope to be more cheerful about the future.
Thank you for being with us on this panel.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll be taking a break right now, but when we come back, we'll talk about how movies and popular culture haven't really helped the cause of women's rights, and how if the change has to begin, it has to begin with the rewriting of primary school textbooks.
Education in a textbook case, I think, has value, but it has to start with the kind of stories that we tell and the kind of examples that we create in the stories that we tell our children, irrespective of whether they go to school or not go to school.
Welcome back. You're watching She Rocks, a CNN-IBN special broadcast on Women's Day. Sanjay, I was talking about school textbooks and how, as I just mentioned, when we grew up, the book said, Sita pani bharti hai aur Ram pathshala jata hai. Sita never goes to the pathshala, and I think that's where the problem really begins, that you're raising an entire generation with this preconception.
Education, I think, is one of the primary issues that one has to look at, not necessarily only in the textbook case. We have to look at stories. I mean, you know, when Red Riding Hood was reinvented or the entire theory was re-looked at, one of the big things was, what did it say? The very stories of the Ramayana or the more recent versions of the Ramayana, the traditional Ramayana, it wasn't much of what transpired in the Tulsi version of the Ramayana didn't happen in the traditional Ramayana, which is when Sita took the roop of Kali and actually killed Ravan. The empowering of the woman and therefore the disempowering of the woman has been propagated not just today, it's been propagated across the world through story tales and fables, etc., to bring back the entire issue of that women in some way threaten male sexuality. And the reason for that traditionally is known is that women are all powerful. I mean, if we look around, all of us in our homes have very strong women, you know, and there's some fear that if man gives over, or if a male member of the family gives over that power to the woman, that's the end of that. But many of us know that that actually happens in true life. So education in a textbook case, I think, has value, but it has to start with the kind of stories that we tell and kind of examples that we create in the stories that we tell our children, irrespective of whether they go to school or not go to school. It's those formative stories that makes the difference.
Dr. Tavares, we're talking about an entirely different level of challenges. These are women who've already asserted themselves and gone out and decided to work. But when we talk about rural India, let's say, changing the mindset is going to take its time. Is economic empowerment then our best bet and the best and the best short-term solution to the problems they face?
I think that's right. I think we have to understand autonomy. And I think that many women who haven't really been outside of their own home environment or outside of their village environment don't see themselves as autonomous agents. And so having an independent source of income, having some sort of an income generating activity, and having access to resources that are under their own control does create a sense of autonomy, and from that can grow a sense of individual agency, that I have choices, that I can do what I might think would be important to do, or important to do in the service of the family even, but having the sense of being an individual and making individual choices. That's the first step. And that's a step that really I think we have to understand better, those of us who are women's rights advocates and those of us who are well educated, to understand the mindset of women that have never experienced themselves not only as having individual choices, but haven't even experienced themselves necessarily as individuals. They're always part of that family unit. And so the choices that are made for them or expectations of them come automatically. So yes, I agree with you that having an independent source of income, having some autonomy in the economic sphere can always be the first step for women to beginning to see themselves as agents, individual agents and subjects of history, rather than responding always to what's going on around them.
Thank you all for joining us here on CNN-IBN. We are closing this show with the fabulous Dindigul drummers. Thanks for watching.